It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that feels as though it stretches out forever. For Elon Musk, it was one of those rare moments when even the brightest minds could feel a little drained. The hours seemed to blend into one another as he wrestled with endless meetings, a mountain of emails, and the weight of monumental decisions that hung over his head like ominous clouds. Despite his status as the visionary behind Tesla, SpaceX, and several other cutting-edge companies, even he wasn't immune to the occasional feeling of being overwhelmed. Elon Musk was no stranger to hard work. He had become known for his legendary ability to juggle a multitude of ambitious projects simultaneously, often working 80 to 100 hours a week. His days were typically packed with strategic discussions about sending humans to Mars, launching groundbreaking technologies, and inventing new solutions to some of the world's most pressing problems. But every once in a while, even the most extraordinary minds needed a moment of respite. That afternoon, for reasons he couldn't quite explain, Elon found himself yearning for something simple, something that would allow him to escape the never-ending demands of his life. It wasn't the usual stress relief he sought, like diving into engineering problems or focusing on the big picture. No, today, his mind was drawn to something entirely unexpected. Fast food. Not just any fast food, but Taco Bell. It wasn't the first time he craved it, but it was unusual enough to catch him off guard. After all, this was a man who had revolutionized electric vehicles and helped push the boundaries of space exploration. Yet here he was, feeling a strange desire for a Crunchwrap Supreme. It seemed almost absurd when he thought about it. The same man who was designing rockets that would one day carry humans to other planets was now about to indulge in a taco. But sometimes, even the wealthiest people on Earth craved the simplest things. For Elon, the appeal of Taco Bell went beyond the food itself. It was a reminder of a time before he was a billionaire, before his name was synonymous with innovation. It was a taste of normalcy, of a life that didn't involve billion-dollar decisions or the weight of entire industries on his shoulders. As he hopped into his Tesla and began driving to the nearest Taco Bell, Elon felt a sense of nostalgia wash over him. He remembered a time when life was simpler, when he was just a young man trying to figure things out, coding, tinkering with new ideas, and grabbing quick meals in between. Back then, there was no grand plan for humanity's future in space. There were just small, incremental steps toward building a future. And for that young Elon, Taco Bell was just another part of the routine. The Taco Bell he pulled up to was an unremarkable place, nestled in between a convenience store and a strip mall. The sort of fast food joint where no one would expect to see a billionaire casually stroll in for a meal. That's exactly what Elon liked about it. For a man who was often under intense scrutiny, this was a rare opportunity to be anonymous, to feel like just another person. As his Tesla silently glided into the parking lot, he couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of what the media might say. Elon Musk ditches work to get tacos. The headline practically wrote itself. He stepped out of the car, dressed in a simple black hoodie and jeans. He didn't look like the eccentric billionaire the world often saw in the media. He didn't need to. On days like this, he preferred to blend in, to be just another guy grabbing a quick meal. There was something oddly liberating about it. No security detail, no assistants running around, no calls or messages constantly demanding his attention. Just Elon and his hunger, a fleeting moment of peace in an otherwise chaotic life. The familiar bell above the door chimed as Elon stepped into the Taco Bell. The interior was exactly as you would expect. A few customers scattered around the booths, the distinct smell of seasoned beef and melted cheese wafting through the air, the soft hum of the soda machine in the background. The kind of place where no one would bat an eye if a regular customer walked in. And so, no one did. At least not at first. Elon approached the counter and quickly scanned the menu. There was no need to deliberate for long. He knew what he wanted, a Crunchwrap Supreme, his go-to order whenever he needed to hit the reset button. As he stood there, waiting for the cashier to take his order, he found himself reflecting on the hectic week ahead. SpaceX had some big milestones coming up with Starship, and Tesla's latest AI project was progressing full throttle. His mind was constantly buzzing with new ideas, with designs for the future, and with strategies for his company's next moves. But in that moment, as he stood in line waiting for his tacos, he allowed himself to let his mind wander, even if just for a moment. It wasn't often that he could allow himself a break like this, no pressing matters demanding his immediate attention. But here, in this small Taco Bell, Elon felt like he could take a breath. It was a small thing, but it was enough to reset his mind, to remind him that even amidst all the ambition and stress, it was okay to take a moment for himself. The cashier, a young woman in her 20s, glanced at him as she took his order. Her eyes widened ever so slightly. There was a recognition there, but for a moment, she couldn't place him. Then it hit her. Elon Musk, the billionaire CEO, the founder of Tesla and SpaceX, standing in line at Taco Bell. Her heart skipped a beat, and she froze for a second. It was a surreal moment, one that she would likely remember for the rest of her life. She managed to keep her composure and greeted him with a nervous smile. "Hi, welcome to Taco Bell. What can I get for you?" Elon returned the smile, giving her a small, reassuring nod. He wasn't interested in any fuss. He just wanted food, like anyone else. "I'll have 2 Crunchwrap Supremes," he said simply, his voice calm and casual, as if he did this all the time. The cashier punched in the order, her hands shaking ever so slightly. She handed him his receipt, still struggling to come to terms with the fact that Elon Musk was standing right in front of her. "It'll be just a few minutes," she said, trying to act normal despite the surreal nature of the situation. Elon gave her a polite nod and took a step back, finding a spot to stand near the counter. He couldn't help but feel a little amused by the whole interaction. For all the high-tech innovations he was responsible for all the life-changing missions he was spearheading, this moment, waiting for a taco, felt oddly refreshing. He realized that no matter how far he climbed, no matter how high he soared, there would always be moments like this where he could be just another person in line, experiencing something simple and human. As he stood there, his thoughts wandered again. This time, they strayed toward the future. SpaceX's next steps in its quest to make space travel accessible, Tesla's ongoing push to revolutionize the automotive industry, and how his companies would work to address climate change. It was always a whirlwind of ideas, but this brief moment of stillness gave him a chance to center himself, to breathe, to remember why he did it all, to make a difference, to challenge what was possible, and to create a future for humanity that would be more extraordinary than anyone could have imagined. But then, just as he was settling into the quiet of his thoughts, he heard something that would change the course of his day and give him a new perspective on everything. It wasn't a voice that called his name or a comment about his work. No, it was the soft, whispered conversation of 2 boys sitting just a few feet away from him, a conversation that caught him completely off guard. It wasn't the usual banter of teenagers. It was something different, something desperate. As the seconds ticked by, Elon's attention drifted away from his own thoughts and focused on the 2 young voices rising just behind him. He hadn't initially thought much of it. The occasional chatter from teenagers in fast food restaurants was nothing unusual, but something about this conversation struck him differently, causing him to pause and listen more carefully. The voice of the older boy was hurried, tinged with a sense of urgency that made Elon's attention snap into focus. It wasn't the sort of casual back-and-forth one might expect from teens sharing inside jokes or discussing their day. No, this was a conversation with weight, with a seriousness that felt completely out of place in such an environment. "We have to do it tonight," the older boy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If we don't, Mom's not going to get better." Elon blinked in surprise. The words hit him hard, sinking into his mind like a stone cast into water. The mention of Mom instantly piqued his interest, and he turned his head ever so slightly, trying to get a better look at the boys without making it too obvious. The younger boy responded in a hesitant whisper, his words betraying fear. "But what if we get caught? You know what they do to people who steal." Steal. The word hung in the air, and Elon's stomach tightened. His hand, which had been hovering over his wallet in preparation for the payment, froze mid-motion. He had been so focused on the routine of ordering, but now the situation in front of him felt anything but ordinary. He looked at the boys more intently, his sharp mind piecing together the fragments of their conversation. The older boy, his face set in a grim expression, leaned closer, speaking even more urgently now. "It's just the cash from the register. No one will notice. We need it, okay? I don't know what else to do." Elon felt a surge of empathy. This wasn't the mischief of teenagers out looking for trouble or playing pranks. No, this was something far more serious. The desperation in the older boy's voice rang loud and clear. There was fear in their words, and it wasn't the usual fear of being caught doing something wrong. This was the kind of fear that only comes when a person is backed into a corner, when the only choice they feel they have left is a dangerous one. Elon shifted his position slightly, making sure not to draw attention to himself. The boys were seated at a small table in the corner of the restaurant, hunched over as though they were carrying the weight of a secret they couldn't share with anyone else. There was an intensity in the older boy's eyes that made Elon's heart ache with an unfamiliar feeling of sadness. "We don't have any other choice," the older boy continued, his voice trembling. "We'll just take the money from the register. Then we'll have enough to buy the medicine. It's all we need." Medicine. That word echoed in Elon's mind, and a knot formed in his stomach. The realization hit him like a sudden wave. These boys weren't trying to steal for the thrill of it. They weren't just looking to buy something they wanted. They were doing it because they needed the money to save their mother, who was sick. Elon's thoughts raced. He had seen countless stories of human struggle. He had witnessed both triumphs and tragedies in his work and personal life. But this was different. This wasn't some abstract problem to be solved with advanced technology or cutting-edge innovation. This was real life. And in that moment, Elon knew he couldn't just ignore it. The younger boy's voice trembled as he spoke again. "I don't want to do this. What if someone gets hurt?" The older boy seemed to pause, as though searching for the right words. When he spoke again, it was with a forced calmness that Elon could sense wasn't entirely genuine. "We'll be quick, in and out. No one will even notice. I promise. No one gets hurt. No one gets hurt." Elon knew all too well how easy it was for things to spiral out of control when fear and desperation took over. In a situation like this, one bad decision could change their lives forever. The consequences of what they were contemplating, stealing money, could be disastrous, especially for two young boys already carrying the burden of their mother's illness. Elon wasn't sure what he could do, but he knew he couldn't just walk away from this. As the cashier handed him his 2 Crunchwrap Supremes, Elon nodded absent-mindedly, his mind still fixed on the conversation unfolding behind him. The simple exchange of food didn't feel important anymore. His thoughts were consumed by the 2 boys, and the gravity of what they were considering weighed heavily on his heart. He had to act. But how? How could he intervene without making the situation worse? He turned back to look at the boys once more, his heart swelling with a mixture of concern and a deep, inexplicable urge to help. The younger boy's face was downcast, his eyes filled with uncertainty, while the older one seemed resolute but scared. Elon had spent so much of his life thinking about grand, world-changing ideas, space exploration, the future of energy, artificial intelligence. But here, in this Taco Bell, the real-world challenge of helping 2 young boys in distress felt more urgent than anything he had ever faced. For a moment, he stood frozen, grappling with the decision of what to do. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He could walk away, pretend he hadn't heard anything, let them continue with their plans. Or he could do something about it, step in, and try to steer these kids away from making a choice that could haunt them forever. Elon Musk wasn't a stranger to bold decisions. In fact, he had made his reputation on them. But this wasn't about rockets or electric cars. This wasn't about changing the world with a new technology. This was about changing the lives of two young boys who were clearly desperate, trapped by circumstances far beyond their control. After a few tense moments, Elon made his decision. He didn't know what exactly he was going to say or how he was going to help, but he knew that if he walked out of that Taco Bell without doing anything, he would never forgive himself. He took a deep breath, straightened his posture, and walked toward the boys' table, feeling an unexpected sense of resolve building within him. He had to act now before things escalated. His mind was racing with thoughts of how to approach them, how to break through their desperation, and convince them there was another way. As he reached the table, the boys looked up at him, startled. Elon could see the fear in their eyes, the uncertainty in their faces. They didn't know who he was, not yet, but the tension in the air was palpable. He could see it in their shoulders, in the way they avoided eye contact. They knew they were on the brink of something dangerous, and they were scared. "Hey," Elon said, his voice calm but firm. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. It sounds like you're dealing with something really tough." The older boy opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. He glanced at his younger brother, then back at Elon, clearly unsure how to respond. There was a long pause before the older boy finally spoke, his voice trembling slightly. We just need the money. Our mom is sick. She needs medicine, and we don't know what else to do." His voice cracked as he spoke the last words, revealing the depth of their fear. Elon's heart ached. He could see it now, the full weight of their struggle. These boys weren't criminals. They were just kids, trying to survive in an incredibly tough situation. "I understand," Elon said softly. "But stealing, it's not the answer. I want to help. Let's figure this out together." The words hung in the air for a moment, and the boys looked at him, uncertainty still clouding their expressions. But in that brief exchange, Elon saw something shift in their eyes, a glimmer of hope, perhaps, or the first sign that they didn't have to go down this dangerous path alone. Elon took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't the kind of life-changing innovation he was known for. But for these two boys, in this small Taco Bell on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, it was enough. And in that moment, he realized that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply to be there for someone when they need it most. Elon Musk stood there for a moment, watching the two boys carefully, their young faces still etched with confusion and uncertainty. The atmosphere around them was heavy, laden with the gravity of their situation. For all his years of experience navigating through high-stakes decisions, whether it was launching a spacecraft into orbit or leading a cutting-edge automotive revolution, Elon was suddenly faced with a challenge that felt profoundly different. This wasn't about technologies, profits, or strategies for global impact. This was human connection at its core. Two kids were in distress, and their desperation had led them to a dark place, one that, if not interrupted, could spiral into a future they'd regret. The older boy shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly on edge as he processed Elon's words. His gaze flickered between his younger brother and Elon, unsure whether to trust this stranger. Perhaps it was the uncertainty in his eyes, or the way his hand clenched the edge of the table, that made Elon understand just how much was at stake. The desperation in his voice earlier hadn't been exaggerated. These boys weren't accustomed to reaching out for help. They were too young to understand the full ramifications of their actions, yet too old to ignore the fierce love they felt for their mother. Elon could feel the tension in the air, the shared unspoken understanding that everything could go wrong in an instant. A wrong move, a slip-up, and they could ruin their futures forever. But there was still time. There was always time to choose a different path. "I'm not here to judge you," Elon continued, his voice soft but firm. "I know it must feel like there's no other choice. But there is. You don't need to risk your future like this. There's always a way out. You just have to trust me." The younger boy, still clutching his seat nervously, seemed to shrink into himself, overwhelmed by the idea of facing yet another adult who would scold them for even thinking of stealing. But there was something in Elon's tone, something that was unmistakably genuine, that seemed to calm him, even if just a little. The older boy, on the other hand, remained defiant, his jaw set in that familiar stubbornness of youth, the kind that came when someone felt backed into a corner. "You don't understand. We've tried everything," he snapped, his voice laced with frustration. "We've asked for help before, but no one listens. We're just kids. No one takes us seriously. Our mom needs this medicine, and it's all we can think of." Elon knew that feeling all too well, the sense of helplessness when you feel like the world is pressing down on you, and there's no one to turn to for help. He had been there himself, though in a different context. Years ago, when he had first started out in the world of technology, he had faced the harsh reality of doubt and failure. There had been moments when he wondered if he'd ever succeed, if anyone would take him seriously. But those moments, as painful as they were, had also shaped his resilience, and they had taught him that there was always more than one way to approach a problem. "I get it," Elon said, his voice steady now, more composed. "When I was younger, I faced a lot of obstacles too. People told me my ideas were impossible, that I'd fail. But I didn't give up. I found another way, even when I couldn't see it at first." The older boy blinked, surprised at this unexpected admission. Elon wasn't just talking about lofty space missions or electric cars. He was talking about perseverance, about finding ways to overcome the toughest challenges, no matter how insurmountable they seemed. "Maybe you're right," the older boy muttered, almost more to himself than to Elon. His voice was softer now, the edge of resistance beginning to fade. "But what can we do? We don't have any money, and no one's going to help us." Elon paused, considering his next words carefully. He wasn't some magical savior with all the answers, but he knew that sometimes just showing up and offering a different perspective could make all the difference. His mind raced, evaluating possible solutions, ways to address the immediate crisis without putting these kids on a path they would regret for the rest of their lives. "You don't need to steal," Elon said again, this time more calmly. "There are other ways to get the help you need. It's not going to be easy, but it's possible." The older boy met Elon's gaze, his eyes searching for any hint of insincerity. But all he saw was honesty. Elon wasn't offering empty promises. He wasn't offering a quick fix, but something far more valuable: hope. "Let me help you," Elon continued, his voice now resolute. "I'll cover the cost of the medicine. And more importantly, I'll help you find the right people who can support you and your mom. You don't have to do this alone." The older boy's face shifted, and for a split second, Elon saw the smallest flicker of doubt in his eyes. It was the moment before a breakthrough, the instant when someone, desperate for an answer, realizes that help might actually be within reach. But the boy still hesitated. The idea of accepting help, of trusting someone enough to reach out for it, was a hard step for him. "We don't know who to trust anymore," the younger boy whispered, his voice fragile. He looked at his older brother, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "I understand that," Elon said, nodding. "But not everyone is out to take advantage. There are people who care, people who will listen, people who can help. Your mom isn't the only one who matters. You matter too. It's not just about saving one life. It's about saving your future, both of you. You've got your whole lives ahead of you. Don't let one bad choice define them." Elon paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. He understood the weight of them. Sometimes, people just needed to hear that someone believed in them, that someone saw more in them than their current situation. The older boy looked down at the table, the tension in his shoulders loosening just a little. He seemed to be wrestling with the decision. Elon could almost hear the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out whether he could trust this stranger, or if they were simply too far gone to turn back. Elon didn't say anything more for a moment. He just stood there, waiting. He knew he couldn't force the decision. What he could do was offer a glimpse of possibility, show them that there was another path. Finally, the older boy exhaled, his shoulders slumping in defeat, as if the burden he had been carrying for so long had lightened just a little. "You'll really help us?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Elon replied. "You have my word." There was a long pause before the younger boy finally looked up, meeting Elon's eyes for the first time. His gaze wasn't filled with the same fear it had held moments before, but something else. Cautious hope mixed with gratitude. The older boy, now seemingly convinced, stood up slowly and held out his hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse, though there was a newfound strength in it. "We didn't know what else to do." Elon shook his hand, a genuine smile forming on his face. "No need to thank me. I'm just glad you didn't go through with it. There's always another way, even when it feels impossible." As the boys stood up and slowly walked out of the restaurant, the weight of the situation seemed to lift, replaced by a quiet sense of relief. They had chosen a different path, a better path. And in that moment, as Elon watched them leave, he realized that it wasn't about the big world-changing innovations or the revolutionary technologies. It was about moments like this, when the real difference was made, not through grand gestures, but through simple acts of kindness and understanding. In a world often defined by competition, profit, and speed, Elon had learned that the most profound moments of change came when you took the time to listen, to connect, and to help others find their way. And for that, he felt truly grateful. As Elon Musk watched the two boys leave the Taco Bell, his heart felt lighter, though the lingering weight of the moment remained. There was something profound about what had just transpired, a quiet shift in the trajectory of two young lives, one that had nothing to do with rockets or electric cars, but everything to do with something far more fundamental: humanity. The boys had walked away with the promise of help, not just for their mother, but for themselves. It wasn't about the money Elon had offered, though that certainly made a difference. It was about something much more subtle, something intangible but deeply powerful. The knowledge that someone who could easily have ignored their plight, had chosen to step in and offer a hand. It wasn't charity, it was empathy. It wasn't a solution to all their problems, but it was a glimmer of hope in the midst of a storm. Elon stood still for a few moments, watching them disappear into the distance, before turning back to his meal. The Crunchwrap Supremes sat there on the counter, untouched. It wasn't that he wasn't hungry anymore. He was, but his appetite had suddenly shifted. His mind, too, had taken on a new direction. The earlier, almost whimsical desire for fast food had morphed into something more profound. As he looked at the tacos, he realized that his day had taken a turn he hadn't expected. In that brief interaction, he had been reminded of something fundamental. The world of high-tech innovation, of ambitious goals like colonizing Mars and building sustainable energy solutions, was full of ideas that could change the world. But at the end of the day, it was these small, human moments that often made the most significant impact. Perhaps it wasn't the rocket launches or the breakthroughs in AI that defined a person's legacy. Perhaps, just perhaps, it was the quiet act of reaching out to someone who needed it, offering them a chance to change course. Elon sat down, his thoughts drifting, processing everything that had just happened. The noise of the Taco Bell around him faded into the background as he replayed the conversation with the boys in his mind. It wasn't just the desperation in their voices that had struck him. It was the realization that they were at a crossroads, one that many people faced in different forms, at different times in their lives. They had been at the brink of making a decision that could define their future forever. And while they may have been too young to fully comprehend the consequences of their actions, he had been able to offer them a chance to see a different way forward. As he sipped his drink, Elon reflected on his own life, how his path had been shaped by moments of doubt, of fear, and of unexpected opportunities for change. He had not always been the confident, fearless innovator the world knew him as today. In his younger years, when he was just starting to build his companies, there had been moments when he, too, had felt desperate. The early days of Zip2, when he had been virtually broke, working out of a small office with just a handful of employees, were filled with uncertainty. He had no idea how things would play out, and there were countless times when it seemed like everything could fall apart. But somehow he had found a way to keep going, to push through those moments, even when the odds seemed stacked against him. That's the thing about fear and desperation. They are universal. No matter how successful a person becomes, no one is immune to the human experience of struggling with doubt or feeling like the world is against them. But what made the difference for Elon, in those moments when he was at his lowest, was that he had someone who believed in him. His father, his early mentors, even the small group of people who had stuck by him when the world seemed indifferent. They had helped him keep going. They had reminded him that there was always another way. And sometimes, all it took was for someone to show up at the right time. As he sat there, deep in thought, a new clarity washed over him. In many ways, he had spent most of his career trying to solve problems on a grand scale. How could we make humanity a multi-planetary species? How can we fight climate change on a global level? How can we advance technology to the point where it radically transforms our way of life? These were the questions that had occupied his mind for decades, and they were, without a doubt, worthy of his time and attention. But in that moment, he realized something else. The most impactful work he could do wasn't necessarily the work that made the headlines. It wasn't always about space or the future of AI. It was the work that touched people in ways that couldn't always be quantified or measured. The world of technology, of startups, of big ideas, and even bigger problems, often pushed people to focus solely on what was next, on what could be accomplished, on the next big breakthrough. But Elon knew, deep down, that true change didn't always come in the form of grand technological achievements. Sometimes, the most important moments came when you least expected them, when you were simply there for someone in need. The older boy's words, "We've tried everything," echoed in his mind. How many people in the world felt that way? How many people, even in the wealthiest countries, felt like they had run out of options, with no one to turn to for help? And how often did people in power, with resources and influence, simply overlook the very real struggles of others? Elon had the privilege of living in a world where he could help solve problems with the stroke of a pen or the push of a button. But that didn't mean he should forget that there were still small, individual struggles that were just as urgent, just as important. With this new clarity, Elon knew that he couldn't walk away from this. The boy's story had reminded him of something important. There were people in the world who felt as though they had no choices left. And if someone like him, the one who had, over the years, been able to create opportunities for himself and others, could step in and offer a lifeline, then he needed to take that responsibility seriously. Elon finished his meal, though it was no longer about satisfying hunger. It was about taking a moment to reflect on what had just happened, to understand the deeper lessons that had unfolded in those few minutes of conversation. He paid for his meal and left the Taco Bell, stepping out into the fresh air, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. As he slid into the driver's seat of his Tesla, he thought about how often people underestimated the power of small acts of kindness. He thought about how easy it was to get caught up in the big picture, in the next big breakthrough or achievement. But what mattered most, he realized, was how we treated one another, how we chose to show up for each other in times of need. Driving home that evening, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that, somehow, the world felt just a little bit different. The struggles of those two boys had reminded him that, no matter how far he'd come, no matter how high the stakes had gotten in his own career, the small moments, when a person truly connected with another human being, were what defined us. And in those moments, something truly special could happen. Elon Musk had changed the world in many ways, but perhaps in that Taco Bell, in that brief interaction with two boys in desperate need of help, He had experienced one of his most meaningful contributions yet, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could change everything. The days following that quiet encounter at Taco Bell unfolded in a way that left Elon Musk reflecting deeply on the complexities of his life. For all the grandeur of his ventures, SpaceX's relentless drive to make life multiplanetary, Tesla's commitment to accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy, and the countless other projects that filled his schedule, Elon had always operated with the knowledge that real, lasting change wasn't just about the big leaps. Sometimes it was about the small, often unseen moments where human connection and compassion made a world of difference. The encounter with the two boys and their desperate situation had proven that to him more clearly than anything else. As the week progressed, Elon found himself thinking about those boys constantly. He hadn't been able to forget the look in their eyes, the fear and helplessness that had defined their actions. Yet, as he walked them through their decision to choose another path, a new sense of hope had emerged in their faces, even though they had only glimpsed it for a fleeting moment. It had reminded him of the transformative power of belief. They hadn't just been looking for money or a quick solution. They had been looking for someone to tell them that things could get better, that they didn't have to continue down a dangerous road. That's when Elon made a decision that surprised even himself. He realized that the promise he'd made to them wasn't just about covering the cost of their mother's medicine. No, it was about giving them a glimpse of a different future, one that wasn't shaped by desperation and fear. It was about showing them that they were not alone in their struggle, and that even when things seemed impossible, there was always a way forward. But he couldn't just leave it at a simple promise. This was bigger than that. So Elon set out to keep his word, not just by helping them pay for their mother's medication, but by offering them an opportunity to change their course in life. He spent the next few days making calls, reaching out to a network of trusted contacts. People who could help the boys and their family in ways far beyond just a handout. Elon knew that resources, especially in times of crisis, could make all the difference, but he also understood that the real solution wasn't just about giving. It was about empowering people to take charge of their own futures, to provide them with the tools, education, and support they needed to stand on their own 2 feet. By the end of the week, Elon had arranged for the boys to receive more than just a few $100s for medicine. He connected them with a local support organization that specialized in helping families in crisis. He worked with some of his closest colleagues at Tesla and SpaceX to find an internship for the older boy, an opportunity to learn skills and gain experience that could eventually lead to a real job. Elon also set up a college fund for both of them, a small but significant gesture that could, in time, provide them with the chance to break free from the cycle of poverty that had trapped them. As he watched these plans unfold, Elon couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. The decisions he had made, some of them difficult and some of them uncomfortable, had been worth it. He had chosen to take a step back from the world of billion-dollar companies and space missions and focus on something much more human, the potential of 2 young lives. This wasn't something that would make the headlines. There would be no awards, no recognition. But Elon didn't need any of that. He had been driven for so long by the need to change the world in grand, transformative ways. Yet the realization that he could make a tangible difference in someone's life on a smaller scale, through a conversation, through listening, through offering a chance, had opened his eyes to something profoundly important. The world was full of small moments where real change could happen, and if you paid attention, you could help steer those moments in the right direction. A few months later, Elon found himself thinking about the boys again. Their mother's health had improved with the help of the medicine Elon had paid for, and the older boy had started his internship at Tesla. The younger one, who had once been filled with so much doubt and fear, had found a mentor in one of the engineers who worked closely with Elon. These were small steps, of course, but they were steps in the right direction. Steps that had given these boys a real shot at something better. And as far as Elon was concerned, that was the true measure of success. Elon never saw the boys again, but the impact of that encounter stayed with him. It had taught him something he would carry with him for the rest of his life, that the most important changes in the world weren't necessarily the ones that made the headlines. The world needed more than just innovators and pioneers. It needed people who could reach out, who could see beyond the noise and the headlines and recognize the struggles of others. Sometimes, the biggest difference you could make was not by solving a world-scale problem, but by helping someone who was facing a much smaller, yet equally significant challenge. In the months that followed, Elon returned to his usual routine of meetings, strategy sessions, and long hours spent on SpaceX and Tesla. The urgency of these grand projects was undeniable. But every now and then, as he sat in his office or in a Tesla meeting, the memory of those two boys would resurface. It reminded him that the true essence of progress wasn't always about reaching for the stars. Sometimes it was about lifting others up, helping them reach their own potential, no matter how small their current circumstances seemed. One afternoon, as he was reviewing plans for SpaceX's next mission, a message popped up on his phone. It was from a contact at the local support organization he had connected with the boys. The message was short and to the point. "The boys wanted me to let you know they're doing well. They're grateful for everything you did. The older one's been accepted to a trade school, and the younger one has applied to a robotics program. They said they couldn't have done it without you." Elon smiled to himself. He didn't need much more than that. He knew that the road ahead would still be difficult for them. Life wasn't easy, and success wasn't guaranteed. But for the first time in a long while, Elon felt that the work he was doing was more than just about technology or building the future. It was about building people up. It was about making sure that the world they were creating, the world he was so passionate about shaping, was one that gave everyone, no matter their background, the chance to succeed. For a moment, Elon let the words sink in. He thought about the path his own life had taken, the struggles, the failures, the moments when everything seemed to be falling apart. And yet, in those very moments, he had learned to keep moving forward. He had found people who believed in him, who had helped him take those crucial first steps. Now it was his turn to do the same for others. This wasn't just about shaping the future of humanity on a cosmic scale. It was about shaping the future, one person at a time. As he put his phone down and returned to the tasks at hand, Elon's thoughts remained on the boys. Their new lives, their new opportunities. It wasn't the dramatic, world-changing moment he had been known for, but it was a moment of change nonetheless. And sometimes, that's all it takes to make a real difference in the world. The weeks that followed that unexpected encounter at Taco Bell seemed to slip by in a blur for Elon Musk. Life had returned to its usual fast pace. Meetings, innovations, rocket launches, and corporate strategies. The weight of his work had always been heavy, but the impact of the encounter with the two boys lingered in a way that he hadn't anticipated. For a man whose life was constantly measured by milestones and breakthroughs, the small, human moments had a way of unexpectedly grounding him. They reminded him of the importance of empathy in a world so often focused on achievement and progress. Elon had always believed that humanity's most significant challenges lay in the great ventures of the future, making life multiplanetary, transitioning the world to sustainable energy, and creating technologies that could radically alter the course of civilization. But over the past few months, a new perspective had emerged in his thinking. The encounter with the boys had reminded him that, sometimes, the most profound impact one could have was not in the vastness of space or the frontiers of technology, but right here on Earth, in the lives of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. He hadn't forgotten about them. He kept a distant, but watchful eye on the progress of the older boy's internship at Tesla and the younger one's involvement in the robotics program. From the updates that came through the support organization, he knew that the boys had taken their chances seriously, and both had made significant strides. It had become clear to him that they were no longer defined by their circumstances or their past struggles. They were carving out new futures for themselves, and in a way it was his quiet involvement that had helped illuminate the path forward. Elon had never been one for overt gestures. He rarely made headlines with acts of charity, preferring instead to focus on solutions that could impact millions of people. But this was different. This was personal. These were lives he had touched, lives that had once seemed destined for a darker path. And in helping them, he had rediscovered something important: the true power of human connection. It wasn't just about offering money to solve immediate problems. It wasn't even about the internships or the robotics programs. What mattered most was the belief he had offered them, the belief that their lives were worth more than the tough breaks they had received, more than the tough choices they were contemplating. That small act of offering help without judgment, without expectation, had changed something inside them. It had opened up a door to possibilities they hadn't thought were there. But as much as the experience had affected him, Elon couldn't help but wonder how many other kids were out there just like them. Kids who were caught in situations beyond their control, whose futures were at risk because of circumstances they hadn't created. How many lives were teetering on the edge, waiting for someone to show up and offer them a different path? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that his involvement in the boys' lives was just a small drop in the ocean of need. One evening, as he sat at his desk at SpaceX, reviewing some plans for an upcoming mission, his thoughts turned again to those boys. He realized that he had an opportunity, not just for them, but for others too. The work he was doing at SpaceX, at Tesla, at the Boring Company, these were all part of a larger vision to reshape the world, to make it a better place for future generations. But what about the kids who would never get a shot at that kind of future? What about the kids who were too busy worrying about their next meal, or the ones who felt the pressure of their family's survival more than any academic or career dream? The idea started to take shape slowly at first, but it soon felt as if it were meant to be. Elon had spent years revolutionizing industries and working toward the grand vision of a multi-planetary future. But the more he reflected on his encounter with the two boys, the more he realized that perhaps the key to changing the world wasn't always about building bigger rockets or smarter cars. Maybe it was about creating opportunities for the people who needed them the most, the ones who were on the brink, who couldn't see the future because they were too busy struggling with the present. The concept of a foundation began to form in his mind. A foundation that would focus not on grandiose global issues, but on helping disadvantaged young people break out of cycles of poverty and hardship. The idea wasn't just to give them financial assistance. It was about providing them with the tools and the mentorship they needed to create their own future, to give them access to education, career opportunities, and most importantly, hope. The foundation would aim to provide mentorship, internships, scholarships, and support for the kids who felt like they were out of options. Elon thought about how the older boy had been given an internship at Tesla and how it had shifted his perspective. It wasn't just about giving someone a job. It was about giving them an experience, a vision of what was possible. It was about helping them see themselves as something more than their current circumstances. Elon reached out to a few people in his network, those who had supported him in his own journey. People in tech, education, and social justice, to get their input on the idea. What began as a personal reflection on one small act of kindness had started to snowball into something far bigger. An initiative that could potentially change the lives of countless others, just as it had done for those two boys. The foundation would be grounded in his own experiences. Elon had grown up with many advantages, but he had also known what it was like to struggle, to feel like the world wasn't interested in your success. His parents had divorced when he was young, and he had faced isolation and rejection in his early life, often struggling to find his place in the world. He had learned from his hardships, from the moments of doubt and fear, and had discovered that resilience was born from the belief that there was always a way forward. But not everyone had that belief. Many kids were caught in circumstances where hope was in short supply, and that's where the foundation would focus its energy, on inspiring young people to believe in themselves again, to help them see that they weren't defined by their struggles or their backgrounds. They were defined by what they chose to do with their futures. As Elon began to shape the Foundation's mission and strategy, he found himself reconnecting with something he hadn't realized he had lost: a sense of purpose beyond the monumental goals that had defined his career. Of course, he was still deeply committed to the missions of SpaceX and Tesla, to creating sustainable energy solutions and making space travel accessible. But this felt different, more immediate, more human. It felt like something that could reach people in a way that was meaningful on a personal level. In the months that followed, Elon worked with a team to get the Foundation off the ground. He knew it would take time to make a real impact, to build the systems and resources necessary to support young people effectively. But as he moved forward with his vision, he couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment that was unlike anything he had experienced in his other ventures. This was something that was, in its essence, about people. It was about empowering young people to dream again, to realize that their potential wasn't tied to the circumstances of their birth, but to the choices they made and the opportunities they seized. The Foundation began to take shape, and soon, word started to spread. Stories of kids who had been given the chance to change their lives began to emerge. Kids who had received scholarships, mentorships, and internships that would have otherwise been out of reach. As the initiative gained momentum, Elon found himself being approached by others who wanted to help, who wanted to be a part of the mission. It wasn't about the size of the donation or the spotlight that came with it. It was about the shared belief that, no matter where you came from or what challenges you faced, everyone deserved a chance to succeed. And as he stood there, looking over the first batch of success stories, young people who had gone on to internships at companies like Tesla, SpaceX, and other innovative organizations, Elon realized that in some small way, he had found a new mission. This was the mission that reminded him of why he had started all of this in the first place: to make a difference, not just on a planetary scale, but on a human scale, one life at a time. As Elon Musk stood before the growing list of success stories from his foundation, he felt a quiet satisfaction that transcended any of his previous accomplishments. This initiative, which had started as a simple act of kindness in a Taco Bell, had blossomed into something much larger, something that, in its own way, was just as significant as sending humans to Mars or revolutionizing the electric car industry. The boys from Taco Bell, whose lives he had touched so unexpectedly, were just the beginning. Through the Foundation, countless others were now finding the guidance, the hope, and the opportunity they had once believed was out of their reach. Their lives were being transformed, not by the wealth Elon had accumulated or the technologies he had pioneered, but by the belief that someone cared about their potential, that someone was willing to see them for who they could become, not just for where they came from. Elon had always understood that success was often a product of perseverance, of pushing through obstacles, and thinking beyond what was currently possible. But the journey to success didn't always have to be made alone. The boys, and the countless others who had since benefited from his foundation, were proof that sometimes success was not just about individual effort, but about creating a network of support and opportunity that enabled others to rise up alongside you. As he looked over the updates on the young people his foundation had helped, some had gone on to college, others had found careers in tech, in engineering, in the trades. It became abundantly clear to him that the future wasn't just about grand technological advancements. It was about shaping that future with people who believed in themselves and had the chance to build on their dreams. For the first time in years, Elon felt a sense of peace with the direction his life was taking. He had built a legacy of innovation, of forward-thinking solutions for the planet and beyond. But it was this work, this quiet, often uncelebrated work of helping others rise, that had brought a new kind of fulfillment. It was as if he had come full circle, understanding that change, whether on a grand or personal scale, began with belief, not just in technology or in visions of the future, but in the people who would one day shape that future. Elon had always been known for solving seemingly impossible problems, tackling challenges that most thought were beyond human capability. But in helping those two boys, in recognizing their potential and guiding them toward a better path, He had realized that sometimes the most important thing one could do was show up for others, to provide them with the belief that they too could overcome, that they too could find their way. In that moment, as he reflected on the ripple effect of that one small action, Elon realized that this was the true power of change. It wasn't just about the breakthroughs that changed industries, or the technologies that reached the stars. It was about the quiet, everyday acts of kindness that, like a pebble dropped in a pond, sent ripples of hope and opportunity out into the world. And perhaps in the end, that would be the legacy that mattered most. Not just a legacy of innovation, but one of compassion. One that reminded people that no matter where they started, no matter how hard their journey, they too could reach the stars. The future, after all, was never written. It was built, one person, one act of kindness at a time. As Elon Musk looked toward the future, he knew that his work was far from finished. But now, with a renewed sense of purpose, he was more committed than ever to ensuring that the future he was building wasn't just one of technological advancement. It was one where every person, no matter their background, could find a path to greatness. Because in the end, the most meaningful innovation was not in creating a better world for just a few, but in creating a world where everyone had the chance to succeed, to rise, and to make a difference. And so, as Elon Musk continued to push the boundaries of what was possible, he carried with him the lesson he had learned that day in Taco Bell, that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs don't come from technology. They come from belief in others, in the possibility of change, and in the power of human connection. The future was a vast and uncertain place, but as long as there were people willing to help each other, to lift one another up, it would always be filled with hope. And with that hope, anything was possible. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.